Our next witness, Ned Helm, is a founder and president of the Center for Clean Air Policy and has more than 25 years of experience working on climate change and air policy. Mr. Helm advises Congress, state governments, and the European Commission and developing countries on those issues. He played a key role in the development of the Clean Air Act of 1990 and the European Union's emission trading system. So we welcome you, sir. Whenever you're ready, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm kind of a cleanup hitter here, and I'll try to cover the points that maybe weren't covered by my colleagues. As you mentioned, we work a lot with key developing countries, China, India, Brazil, and Mexico in particular, and we work with a number of the states in the United States. During the course of the Bali meeting, we brought together ministers from 25 countries. Cristiano was part of that meeting and talked about the Bali roadmap and the idea of providing incentives for developing countries to go beyond what they have done. And I'll show you in a minute a slide that shows exactly how much effort they've made. And it was endorsed by all of those present and certainly became a part of the final agreement. We also hosted a meeting for Senator Kerry and your staff and other staffs there with the leadership of the European Union, a very constructive exchange on a lot of these issues. I want to make 4 points this morning. First, I want to emphasize the difference in vision between the United States and that of the European Union and developing countries and the rest of the world in this debate. Secondly, I want to talk about the EU's leadership. I think what they did going into Bali and what they did at Bali was critical to the outcome and deserves a lot of recognition and reflects dealing with the competitiveness issue in an effective way, and I want to come back to that. Thirdly, I want to echo what Cristiano and others have said about the role of developing countries and sort of provide you with some actual detail on the level of effort developing countries have undertaken already and what we expect coming forward. And finally, I want to address the issue that Mr. Sensenbrenner raised earlier about competitiveness. I think the European Union has crafted a much better path, a much more positive path to dealing with that than we have so far in the U.S., where the major effort so far has been this border tax adjustments provision proposed by Mr. Bingaman and others in the Senate bill. I think there's a much better path that developing countries would welcome that would move the ball forward rather than sort of saber rattling as we saw the administration do a bit of during the debate. Okay, let me hit quickly these points. In terms of difference in vision, I think the fundamental difference here is Europe and developing countries see this as a process where we take unilateral action, we step forward, make commitments, and then we work together through incentives to go beyond that. That it's a joint effort. We've all got to rise together to meet this challenge. In contrast, the U.S.'s view has been, let's all make pledges, let's have some weak aspirational goals for 2050, and then call it a day. I mean, the heart of the difference here is, do we do something in 2020 that ensures that we still have the possibility of meeting the goal we want in 2050, or do we sort of see what happens and hope for the best? Basically, unless we make a decision in 2020 that's pretty concrete, we basically wipe out our chance of meeting the budget in 2050. In terms of EU leadership, as you know, the heads of state of Europe back in March agreed to a 20% reduction below 1990 levels on their own unilaterally, regardless of what anybody else does, and they propose to do 30% or more below 1990 if other developed countries step forward and if major developing countries made comparable efforts. And that really set the bar for the discussion at Bali. It was a very useful signal, and it also sent the signal that the EU sees this as not just a question of narrow competitiveness concerns, but this is a bigger deal in that we can take a hit in the cement industry, the steel industry in the short run in return for solving this much larger problem. I think that's the way we got to think about this issue. In terms of developing country leadership, let me ask the team to put the slide up for me. I think this is a statement by the minister from South Africa, and I think it really captures where we are. He said basically developing countries are saying voluntarily that we're willing to commit ourselves to measurable, verifiable mitigation action. And then he said, it's never happened before. A year ago, this was totally unthinkable. This is what he said right before the U.S. caved. And I think this gives you a context of how much of a watershed, how much of a breakthrough this was. Next slide, please. Oh, I haven't? Okay. Okay, great. This shows you quickly the numbers. As Cristiano mentioned, the gray line is what Lieberman Warner would do in 2015. The blue line is what the EU's minus 30% target would do. The red line is what China, Brazil, and Mexico, with laws on the books today in each of these countries, policies on the books today, if fully implemented, they would make greater total reductions from their business as usual levels than the European Union or the Lieberman Warner bill. So this puts to sleep once and for all this myth about developing countries aren't doing anything, so we shouldn't do anything. Here are the facts, and as others have said, this is about car standards. This is about a 20% improvement in energy efficiency by 2010. This is by 2010. The Lehman-Warner numbers are for 2015 and 2020. So it gives you a sense of how big this is. I was in China the last 2 days. Discussions with them, I was impressed by how committed they are. A lot of criticism has been, oh, they only got 1% the first year. This year, they'll get 4% of that 20% goal, and they're making big steps to go further in the coming years. Let me close with a quick word on competitiveness. I'll come back to it hopefully in the questions. Europe has a high-level group on competitiveness. They brought together 500 chief executives. I got to speak there week before Bali. All the leadership of the European Commission, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of Transportation, and Commissioner of Environment, all met. They agreed on a package on competitiveness that says sectoral approaches make sense. Let's offer carrots to developing countries to take a similar carbon per ton of cement, carbon per ton of steel goal, offer some incentives in terms of financing, and we get toward that proverbial level playing field that we hear so much about, that Mr. Sensenbrenner was talking about. This is a much better path, an incentive-based approach, than this idea of putting border tax adjustments on everybody. And Europe talks about border tax adjustments too. The companies are just as worried there as we are here about what happens to our industries. But I think they recognize that there's a much better way forward, and this is something that I'd really like to see us do. The U.S. and the Asia-Pacific Partnership started this thing, but as usual, they let it die by being unwilling to do anything serious. It's a classic story of everything we touch turns to you-know-what. That's what's happened in terms of the U.S. position. So I think there's an opportunity here. There's an opportunity across the aisle here to deal with this issue, and we really got to grab that piece. Thank you.